I always forget to put in the British ringtone for that. So we'll see. Maybe next time. Mollie Leivars, filmmaker, director, producer, writer, owner of Spirit Productions. Thank you for being here today. What
Thank you
are
for
some of
having me.
your favorite things about filmmaking?
Oh, I think there's so many different things. It's kind of oh, it's kind of taken over my life, to be completely honest, but in a good way. So it feels like it's like I can't even go for a walk anymore without like looking at things and thinking, oh, that might be a good script or something. But I think for me, it's the people that you meet and the people that you can work with, because it's people that are coming from different areas and all different walks of life, and everyone has a story about how they got involved in the industry, and everyone's story is different. So I think just people's stories and just being around amazing people that I wouldn't necessarily have got to meet had it have not been through film. So I think the people make it for me.
What came first for you? Was it writing or the idea of filmmaking?
It was writing first of all, because I'd been writing ever since I was little, but I'd always I always saw writing as like short stories or books. And then I got to an age where I thought that I might try a book, and I realized that I just didn't have the patience at all. I'd get like maybe a chapter in and I'd be like, I can't cope with this anymore. But I was acting from when I was about 12. So that kind of gave me a little bit of an introduction into industry and scripts and things like that. But I'd never considered writing any until it just kind of happened one day. And then I wrote my first script, and then I never really looked back from that. But it was very random. I remember trying it once on a Word document, weirdly. So I had no idea how it was formatted or anything. So my first ever script was horrific. Um, but but yeah, as soon as I tried that, I thought this is what I'd really like to write, because the length was perfect, because I didn't get bored, and there was the way that you can set it out as well was really helpful. The fact that it can be quite straightforward, in the sense of this character is moving here, this is what they're doing, which is something that I've always really liked.
I think that's what I like about script writing as well, is that you can still get that mental picture of what's going on depending on how your mind works. But I don't know if I'd say it's easier than writing a novel. It's different because you take out so much of the detail, because it's either unsaid or left to the director or the actor to put in their part of it. So yeah, I like the idea of exterior night parking lot
Hmm.
that would take pages could take pages in a book, but you're there so quickly in a script. And I do like, do you find that most scripts are between like 100, 120 pages, or do you operate more or less of that?
I think it depends on the project. Like a lot of short films, they'll be between they can even be like one-page scripts if it's just like a really micro 60-second short. Or it can be, I think the maximum for a short film is about 30 minutes, give or take. But then most like films, like feature films, I think the maximum of that is 120. So you're looking at 90 to 120 pages. And they always say that a page a minute. So I seem to go over that quite a bit. So there's always a lot of editing involved.
Well, that's the director's cut.
Yeah. There's
What do you
about
look for?
16 million hours long.
Yeah. What do you look for when you're either writing a script or reading a script? What are those key elements that you could tell just from experience that you're like, okay, this is good?
I think it's I think that when I'm writing, I think mainly it's when there's some kind of connection there. Even if it's something that I haven't experienced, there will always be at least one character or one line or something that is personal to me. Because I feel like it just helps it to flow better. Because with projects, you work on them for so long and they become kind of like a part of you. So I always kind of see it as like giving a part of yourself to a script as well, because of the time that it's going to take and the time that you're going to spend with it. And then in terms of reading scripts, I think you can tell. I think that you can tell when someone's written it from their heart and when it means something to them. I think sometimes you can read scripts and you can recognize the fact that it has been written from like a commercial point of view, in the sense of this will be a good popular film idea, let's write that kind of thing, which is fine and which is good, and helps the industry like go round. But I think that in certain scripts you can feel like the personal aspects behind it, and I love that.
Yeah. So you hear a lot in the industry, or people talk about it, where you have the scripts that you do to pay the bills and then the scripts you do that are the more passion projects. Do you find that's
Mhm.
true?
Yeah, definitely. I think because it's a lot of people are working freelance, and I'm working freelance as well, which obviously is, I mean, it's amazing because it offers so many different opportunities, and no 2 days are ever the same, but also from a stability aspect, it's not at all. So
Mm.
I think that I think that there's a good balance between the two. And I think that even when you're writing something commercially, like in the sense of writing it to pay the bills and stuff, which obviously everyone has to do, I think that there's still like personal aspects that you can add into it, even if it's a completely different genre to what you usually write. I think that there's always like little pieces of your own inner voice that you can add in.
Where do you do when you're writing? Where do you do most of it? Is it in a place you have set up for it, or is it just anywhere?
It's pretty much anywhere. I think I do a lot. I mainly write on my laptop, so a lot of it is in my living room, mainly, or a table, or sometimes if I get an idea quite quickly, I'll like write it down in my car or something. Not while I'm driving, but like before I'm driving, I'll write it down in my car because I know by the time I get home, I would have forgotten it. I have to keep like a notebook next to my bed because a lot of ideas come just as I'm about to fall asleep, which are really annoying. Because then, if I
Mm.
don't write it down, then I can't sleep. So I have to have a little notebook there so I can scribble it. Can't read it the next morning because I've got no idea what I'm talking about. But at least so then I can sleep because it's out my head.
One of the great pieces of technology I found for writing like that before the iPhone, and now I can just put it in the notes. I do
Mhm.
have that worry in the back of my mind of what if I delete it by mistake. And now that they have a new upgrade where you can undo deletions on the notes feature
Mhm.
of the phone, I feel a lot better about that. But still, you have that in the back of your mind of what if something happens to this? It seems like when it's on paper, it's more permanent, but maybe it
Mhm.
only just seems that way. But back in the days, how you're supposed to say it, we say it is I got a pen that had, when you clicked the pen, the end
Mhm.
of it would glow, or it's not like a light, like a flashlight, but it would just glow enough to where you could write, you could see when you were writing. And that
Mhm.
worked great at night because you do have those times where you're like, well, I'll remember this. And you only have to do that a few times with writing to realize you're not going to remember it. So then you
Yeah.
develop that discipline of I have
Mhm.
to write it no matter what, 3 in the morning, whatever. I'm just going to write this down. And then a few times goes by where you can't read it at all, or it
Mhm.
makes no sense. And you're like, okay, I've got to do better at capturing these ideas. So then you try to focus a little bit more the next time and try to, I've done it in lists before because I was like,
Mhm.
okay, well, let's just do single words and maybe that'll spark something in my
Mhm.
memory in the morning. And it is interesting where if you get the right phrase on something, a big idea that you had when you were half asleep, half awake, that you could write one phrase down and it all comes back to you. But
Yeah.
before you read
Mhm.
that, you had no idea. You couldn't
Yeah.
remember it at all. So
Mhm.
that's always amazing to me when that happens. And I think that's the difference between a writer and not a writer is, of course, a writer writes. So you got to write it down.
Yeah, definitely. I find that I voice note quite a lot as well. If I don't have a pen and paper on me, I luckily have two Facebook accounts because I'm old. But I've got two Facebook accounts, so I can message my other account with a voice note, so I can scramble to record it, say everything that I need to say, but then unfortunately I have to listen to it back, which is is not the best because I can't understand what I'm talking about or what I'm saying. But I've written things on receipts and bookmarks before, just in sheer panic of as soon as you get like one little breakthrough from an idea. I did it last night. Actually, I've been writing a script for the past 2 days, and I've reached a block with it. And I came up with the solution to this block and then forgot it instantly. Which so
Oh,
now I'm spending
jeez.
the next hours trying to work out what it was.
Yeah, man, that stinks. The Do you walk around then with what's that little thing that looks like a camera or that gives you the view of a camera that you see in some movies where the director is walking around and looking through it just to do the picture?
Mhm.
Or are you walking around doing this a lot, you know, trying to frame
No, I
things up?
think it's I think I do find that since working in the industry, watching TV or films has been absolutely ruined because I'm watching it and thinking, "Oh, I wonder where the camera was for that shot," or "I wonder where this was," and it's like I can't, like, watch things normally, and I think I annoy everyone quite a bit because, like, I'm impossible to watch a film with because 'cause I'll be like, "Oh, I wonder how they got
Mm.
that shot," or I'll be Googling the actors or Googling the director or something.
That I find that the same with writing too, because you'll read a book and then you're like, oh, well, they mentioned this for a reason. It's not
Mhm,
like somebody came back and put this in because you can see how it's fit in. You're like, this is a little too perfect. Now I know what's going to happen or have an idea of what's going to happen. Yeah.
mhm,
It's like an audio engineer listening to music. It ruins it for them because they're always
yeah,
looking for those layers.
mhm, definitely.
How much of your time do you spend thinking about or experimenting with different ways to capture the shot?
I think I think it's usually when I've got a project in mind. I usually try not to think about it until the day of filming or just a bit before. Because if I do, then I'll get in my own head and I'll plan everything, which obviously isn't great. So I think that there needs to be some wiggle room because obviously you get on set and it might be completely different or a completely different vibe to what you were originally thinking of. And then I feel like if you've got a clear idea of what this project needs to look like completely, then I think that it can make you feel quite stagnant because then you can't adapt with things that happen because obviously everything always happens. So I think that usually I really like it when I've got a location in mind because then I can go and I can look at it and I can work it out and then start to build a I always have a bit of a cloudy image in my head of how I want it to look like. So I always think because someone told me when I made my first film to do that because then you'll never be disappointed with the final thing if you don't have like a clear idea in your head of what it's going to look like. So as I'm writing, I always have a cloudy vision of what it might look like, and then often it's completely different, or sometimes it's a little bit similar, but things always change with it as well.
How much of a collaborative mind or a mindset does it take to be a director?
I think it's really important because I think it's like, I mean, I think that sometimes, I mean, I don't know if it's the case with other people, but I think sometimes, like, even the word director is like a someone to tell you what to do. But for me, it's always been, I mean, fundamentally it is in a way because you're obviously directing everything, but I think it's more like a guiding kind of thing from my perspective. It's a, like, I want to hear about what the actors want to do and what the other crew want to do and things like that, because I think that, because obviously everyone will have an opinion on a certain shot or a line or the project as a whole, and I'll have an opinion myself, but that's not to say that mine's right at all. It could be completely wrong. And there's been many, many times before where I've had like a plan for a shot, and then an actor has suggested something else, and I'm like, you know what, that's better. So let's do that one instead. So I think it's so important because it's, I mean, it takes an army to like create like a film or a short or something. And it's it means like so much to have so many people's input as well, because then I think it makes it better.
Do you do shots where you say, okay, I'm going to do it this way, and then I'll do it that way and see what happens in post or how it works out with whatever the shots are that are after that? What makes the story better?
Yeah, I think so. I always try and, a lot of my, if it's been like my own project, a lot of it I've edited. So I've been able to get more footage than I need just in case, because obviously there's nothing worse than getting to editing and thinking, oh my God, this is like this I've completely missed this shot and this is terrible. So I always try and get as much footage as I can, more than I'll need. So I have like hard drives upon hard drives of footage from previous films that hasn't been used, because like, just because of the way that it was edited together, but like many, many shots of the same thing.
Hmm. How do you deal with or put together your shot list and call sheets?
With a lot of swearing usually, it's like if I'm doing it on my own, 'cause there is something so frustrating to me about like technology, which is stupid because I'm supposed to be like young and technologically able, but I'm massively not.
Well,
So
you're still
call
on
sheet.
Facebook. So,
Yeah, yeah. So call sheets for me are like, it's that thing, you know, when you're on a Word document or a PowerPoint, you add something in and then everything just moves. So it's tackling that and trying not to punch something or put a hole through my computer. But no, it's, I always get really, really excited when I'm doing that because I know that it's in the build up to filming, and I know that that's the last few like admin things to do before we actually like go out and do it. So there's always a lot of excitement involved when I'm doing like documents like that.
what's your what's the biggest difference you notice between being an actor and being a director?
I think I think for me it's more confidence, because I feel like, I mean, it might just be me, but I feel like when you're an actor, you feel like, I mean, you get to know the character and you get to know like your lines and everything, you get comfortable with that. But for me, when I was acting, it always felt like I was, because obviously you're performing in front of people, and that can, no matter how long you've been doing it, that's still kind of nerve-wracking. And then I think that your own brain comes into it as well, because it's like, oh, I wonder what I look like, am I going to see the footage and hate what I look like? And then that then influences how you're standing or things like that. But then I think when you're directing, you can look at it from a creative point of view, because if you're not in it, you can take all of that out, like all of any kind of insecurity, you can take that out, because that's not you, it's because you're not in it. So I think that that's the main thing for me, and that's the main thing that I prefer with it, the fact that I can look at things objectively without having to worry about is my hair all right, or or something like that. Because there's always them thoughts come in, and then I know that when I watch the footage, I can watch the film and enjoy it like as a film rather than thinking, "Oh God, I hate the way I look."
Hmm. How often do you have to do reshoots when I guess when you're directing?
Luckily, I never have had to yet. I feel
Hmm.
like it will probably happen one day. But I think it's mainly for features that like reshoots are scheduled in just in case. So I haven't had to tackle that one yet, thankfully. But there have been but luckily when I've been filming like when I filmed my first film, I was filming it over 4 days, but it was split up into two blocks. Um, so luckily the same actors were coming back so I could review the footage after the first 2 days. And because we were in the same kind of location, then any shots that I missed those 2 days, I could then get the next few days, which was really, really helpful because obviously it was my first short and many mistakes were made.
Hmm. After you do a day of shooting and you go back and do, I guess, look at dailies or whatever the industry term is for it, how how much of the time of a normal day is actually doing the shooting versus preparing to do it and dealing with it after it's done?
I think mainly the time spent on a project is never with filming, which is really funny because obviously like that's the main thing. That's the main thing that you're doing is the actual making of it. But it's the planning and the prepping and then the editing and the getting it out there and things like that. I'd say that all encompassing, I'd say it probably takes about a year for all of it. Because obviously then you've got film festivals and all of that kind of thing. Even when it's you can literally be filming for 4 or 5 hours, and that planning has been 7 or 8 hours of planning for 4 or 5 hours of shooting. So it's always a bit of a imbalance, really.
Hmm. I think a lot of things are like that. Like if you were thinking about sports, it would be the same, where
Mhm.
practice is so much more than the game, but
Yeah.
the game is the culmination of it.
Mhm.
How do you how do you deal with, or what have you found is the best way to get your point across to actors when you're directing? Like if you're shooting the scene and they're not getting it the way you want it to be done, what are some of the ways that you try to get your vision across to them?
I think it's mainly just talking about things and then working out. Like, if it's a lot of the time it will be quite similar. It will be that they've seen a similar thing or a similar theme or something, but if it's a case of their perspective of it is completely different to what was originally intended, then I think it's about asking them about their perspective and about where they're coming from, because it could be a case of I can hear that and think, that kind of makes more sense. So let's do it that way. Or then you can better understand, okay, how do we get from that point to this point, or how can we meet in the middle somehow? So I think one of the main parts of directing is just having loads and loads of conversations with people. And if you can do it beforehand as well, before shooting, to go through scripts, to go through characters and things like that, then that's always really helpful. Because then you can get like a good basis beforehand before you get shooting. But yeah, it's mainly just talking to people and talking about the characters and breaking it down and everything like that, and hearing other people's perspectives as well.
Are table reads or reading through the script everybody together, or everybody that's in the scene, is that a usual thing? Is that something that always happens, or is it more of a luxury?
It's I think I've found it a little bit like neither here nor there kind of thing. Sometimes I've done it, sometimes I did it, like, over Zoom, and then I did one in-person one as well, and I think the main part of that, and the main kind of benefit for it, from my perspective, is just getting people to meet each other. Like, not necessarily about the scripts, it's not necessarily about, like, learning the lines, or I mean, that's what you're there for, but I see that almost like a just as something to do whilst people can talk and meet, and because it can be really nerve-wracking, especially if you know that a film has been shooting for, like, 2, 3 days and you're coming in on the 4th day or something. It can be quite, like, nerve-wracking because you're coming in, you feel like everyone else is it feels like school in a way, like everyone
Mhm.
else has already established all of these friendships and you're, like, coming in new. Um, so I found that really helpful just to make sure that everyone, like, I mean, you never have enough time to be, like, best friends with people instantly, but it's enough so that you can recognize people and go up to them and say hello, and things like that, which I think just lessens the anxiety of it a little bit, which is good, and that's something that I really, really want to do,
Mhm.
because I understand it from an acting point of view, so I want to make it as comfortable and as easy as I can, like, knowing that it can be quite a nerve-wracking process.
Does do you find that character acting is a better way, or I don't even know what the industry term is for someone that's not a character actor, but if people show up and they're already in character, is that easier or does that present more problems than if they show up and you're just talking to the person before you start?
Um, I think I mean, if that's what works best for them, then that's great and that's fine. But I think it's good to have a balance, because I think if that's what helps you get into the character, then that's great. But I think also having a little bit of you in the character as well, that's something that I really like. 'Cause it's a lot of the casting process is you're also looking at the people themselves, because it could be, you are working with people, even if it's just for a day, but you're working with them in a completely different environment to how you'd usually work with people. And it's very full on, it's very instant, it can be quite, well, it can be really, really full on. So I think having people that are kind and considerate and are, like, aware of other people and things like that, and are just friendly in general, I think that that's so important. I've been really, really lucky to have people like that I've worked with. So I think it's good to have a balance between the two, so that you can still, because you want it to be enjoyable as well for people. You want people to make friends with people or make new connections and things like that. So I think it's good to have a little bit of both.
Yeah, nice matters. Nice matters, I guess. How much collaboration do you have in the writing phase of if you're putting a script together? Do you talk with people about it before you're doing it, or do you write it and then show some people and see what their ideas of it are just to make sure it's tracking? Or how
I
soon do you involve somebody in your writing?
I have kind of different stages of it. When it's in, like, initial ideas, I'll usually talk to my mom about it. She always knows, like, my ideas, and a lot of the time I will talk at her. So if it's something that I'm trying to brainstorm and I can't quite work it out, I will just, like, I'll sit in front of her and just talk at her, and then eventually, without her even saying anything, I would have got to some kind of conclusion. So I'm very thankful for that. And then I know someone who is a teacher, and she's long suffering because I message her constantly with questions about what would happen if this happens, or what would happen if this happens, or send in her ideas, or, like, I wrote a pilot recently, and the opening scene was really, really important. So I sent that to her, and she's got nothing to do with the industry, but she knows me and knows me really well. So knows when, like, writing is from me, and knows when it's coming from, like, my heart in a way. So I'm constantly sending people like like little scripts, and then eventually it would get to more like industry people that I know. Once I've got like approval of people close to me and people who know me, then that's when I'll move it into industry. But a lot of people I know are very, very long suffering with the amount of questions that I ask. But
Mm.
it's very, very helpful. If you're a writer, get to know a teacher, because it's, especially if you're writing things from like a youth perspective, invaluable.
Have you used any other like subject matter experts besides a teacher? If you were doing something about a person that was a safe cracker, did you talk to a safe cracker? Like things like that.
Well, I was really lucky that with my first film, I started working with the police and taking it around schools and everything like that. So it was really, really beneficial to with my other films, anything that involved crime or anything where it was safeguarding or things like that, then I could ask police officers, which was really, really helpful to be able to get that. Because, I mean, it doesn't have to be like with scripts and things like that, it doesn't have to be completely 100% accurate, because obviously situations are different and like one size doesn't fit all. But to get like a general overview of this is what would happen if this happens, like that's really, really helpful to have.
Hmm. The I was police for a while, and I look at shows like Law and Order, or just police dramas or whatever, and
Mhm.
oftentimes I would go, they didn't talk to anybody about what they thought would be done here. Like
Mhm.
everything's different, and people are different. I understand that, but there is a general attitude or understanding in every profession. I think of like
Mhm.
the norms of that profession. So I, that's the first time I thought maybe it'd be good to have a few subject matter experts that aren't talking to each other, so you can ask one, is this what would happen, and then go to the other and go, hey, do you think this would happen,
Mhm.
and just
Yeah.
to see, because I know in policing, just from firsthand, there's a broad spectrum of reactions to things that you could
Mhm.
probably get. So you need to get the, this is probably what would happen. This is what you would want to happen. And this, in your dreams, if you are writing some fiction, this would work out like this. But
Mhm.
usually it's going to turn out this
Yeah.
way.
Mhm.
How do you evaluate a script, or even more specifically an actor, and identify when acting is bad? Like if you're doing a, I guess, casting, and you're looking at
Mhm.
different people and you go, okay, this person is not the one, not just because they're not your vision of that part, but because they lack a certain something that
Mhm.
it either makes the acting seem like they're acting, or it's just not sincere. How do you filter those out? What kind of methods do you use?
I think it is just, for me, it's gut feeling. It's a lot of it will be that it will be that I'll watch someone's show reel, or they'll send me a self-tape for the role or something like that, and it will be that they they can be incredibly talented, but for that character it might not necessarily work. And I think a lot of the time I can't necessarily put a finger on this is why, or this is why I don't think it will work, or this is why I do think it will work. It is just, I have to kind of like remove all of that and just go off, because a lot of the time with films, before I've watched someone show reel and I've thought of the character, or I've got the character in my head and I've watched it and I've been like, okay, they are that character. Like instantly it will click in my head. So I think it's, but I find that side of things incredibly difficult because I know how much it means to people. So having to say no to anyone is really hard, and it really, really upsets me, because I wish that I could, because I feel like everyone always says, "Oh, maybe not right for this part," but in future we'll keep you on file. And I feel like people don't believe that anymore, because I think a lot of people just say that and don't really mean it. But when I say it, I actually really, really do mean it. And I really hope that people know that, because I feel so terrible. Because it is never a reflection on an actor's talent in any way. It will always be just a gut feeling of what works best for the character.
Yeah, you kind of have to, if not turn off the empathy, mute it a little to where
Mhm.
you can. I mean, if you cast the wrong person, I would think you're not doing justice to the work or to the
Mhm.
piece, to whatever you're going to shoot. So I guess that's perspective too, where you just go, "Hey, you're not the person for this part." Yeah, people would
Mhm.
see that as insincere, I think,
Yeah,
just because
that's
you're
the
dealing
difficulty.
with maybe sometimes with people that have an inflated sense of self. But hmm, when you look at other movies or you're looking at just other motion picture stuff, film, I don't know what the right word is to call it. Do you sometimes see people in parts where you think this actor would have been better in this part, or the idea that they were like they were trying to get an example is probably better to explain this. If I'm watching a show and I go, wow, Brad Pitt would have been good in that part,
Mhm.
maybe they were trying to get as close as they could get to Brad Pitt. Do you
Yeah. Mhm.
do you try to do that in places if you have a vision of what the character is like, and maybe you've written something for a specific person in mind? Are you just trying to get as close as you can to that person that you have in mind?
I think a lot of it is a lot of the shorts that I've done, I've never really had anyone in mind. A lot of it comes from personal experience. So I think I kind of I kind of go off memory more than what I think it would look like. So a lot of it is from memory if it's something that's happened to me or someone that I know. But then when I'm writing pilots or features, because I know that the chances of me being involved in the casting process are slim. So I feel like I can kind of let that happen. I can think of, okay, ideally who would I really, really want to play this role? So I feel like I can kind of mold it in a way. Like, I mean, whether it ever gets made or whether that actor gets involved in it, I've got no idea. Possibly. Um, but I feel like with things that I know that I'm not going to be involved in casting of, or I'm not going to be like head of casting of, then I feel like I can like play about with that a little bit more.
To get a project from script to being made, how much involvement do you have in that? Are you, or what are the keys to being able to bridge? That's two different questions. What are the keys to be able to bridge that gap from script to getting it made?
I
Like,
think a lot of
does it?
it is getting it in front of the right people, and that is incredibly difficult to do, because a lot of it is you almost kind of have to like gaslight people into reading your script in a way, because a lot of people don't accept unsolicited submissions,
Right.
which is good, because obviously I bet that people are always trying, because there's so many writers out there. Um, so I think it's a lot of it is connections, and a lot of it is starting conversations with people, so that even if your current script isn't what they're looking for, then they might be kind enough to say, but send me something else in the future. And then that door's open and that conversation is happening. So I think it's things like that. I think, especially with features and pilots, because short films you can usually do yourself. You could, I mean, ideally you get a producer on board, but a lot of it you can produce yourself, which is a really, really good like stepping stone into things. But then with features and TV, you can produce it yourself, especially features, and it is possible, but it is incredibly difficult. So I think the main thing is getting it in front of people and getting people to read it, which can often feel like running against a brick wall. But one day the brick wall will collapse and you will get there. You just have to keep I always say keep annoying people to the point of they will say, "Yes, I'll read your script just so you can leave me alone." So
Do you copyright your scripts before you shop them? I don't know if that's the industry term.
I do. A lot of people use NDAs as well. I use them sometimes, but I think that when you're sending it to people that like established producers and things like that, I don't think you have to worry about NDAs as much, because I think that, it's if someone stole your script and they're at the level that they are, then it would also look bad on them as well, and they don't need to.
Right.
So I think with things like that, I think that there's a lot of leeway with it. But then when it comes to putting it out in public or sending it out to people, then I think things like that are important just in case, because you never know.
When you say get a producer, is that kind of synonymous with get funding?
Yeah, quite a lot of it, 'cause I mean, it's one of the most difficult points of it is funding. And I think everyone in the film industry is in the same boat. You can have an amazing idea that means so much to you, but then it's also a case of, okay, like, because a lot of people, I mean, some people can self-fund it, and which is great, and that's amazing that they can do that. But there are a lot of filmmakers that come from a working class background, which I do as well, where self-funding just isn't a possibility at all. So it's also about making sure that you obtain funding. But obviously there are so many people going for the same thing. So we have the BFI network. Their short film funding has just opened, and the applications for that, is the biggest funding body for short films as far as I know. So there are so many applications, and a lot of people have to apply multiple years in a row to get a look in. So it can, a lot of projects, when you're trying to get them funded, a lot of it is you have to kind of sit down and think, okay, this is not happening anytime soon. This is something that's going to be a long process. I'm just going into year 2 of a script currently that is a short film that, fingers crossed, will get funded and produced and everything. So, and that could go on for decades, who knows.
Is that what led you to starting Spirit Productions?
It was when I first started it. I think mainly it was because I was really, really nervous for my first short, because it was, I mean, I'd been acting for years, because I've been acting since I was 12, and I made my first short when I was 15. But there was still part of me that was like, it was massive imposter syndrome, because I just felt like I was a bit, mm, like a bit too naff to be like writing and directing and things like that, because it was something that I'd never done before. So that was originally what I set it up as, because I wanted people to be a part of it. 'Cause mainly the company's me, but then people will like come on board for certain projects, and I wanted there to just be an umbrella that people can be a part of as well.
When you're writing, do you ever have moments where you feel like the script is writing itself and you're like, oh, this is great. I didn't expect these two characters to have this interaction, but here it is, and they're having this conversation.
Definitely, and I love it when that happens, because then I feel like I can just let it run. 'Cause I found that I changed my script writing quite a lot over the past like 2 years or so, because I learnt more, and different things were happening and everything like that. But I found that when I then sat down to write, I lost a lot of the initial like creativity, which put me in a writer's block for about 6 months, which was awful. I could not write anything for about 6 months. But now I've been able to kind of let myself just go with it. And then I can go in later and I can edit and make it industry formatted and everything. But I think it's so important to literally just get words on a page or on paper or anything. Just get them out there, and then you can organize and edit and everything, but they need to be out there first. So I love it when it just kind of, it runs away with you a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. What do you think caused that initial loss of creativity or the connection with creativity then to have that 6 months of the abyss?
I think it came just after I won an award, which sounds really stupid because but I think it was that I'd never I'd never considered I'd always wanted to work in the film industry, but I'd never considered it an actual possibility. I'd always thought that it was something that I really, really wanted to do, but it seemed a bit like a pipe dream. And then as soon as I won the award, then it kind of felt like oh, this might actually be able to happen, and this can be something that I can really, really work towards. But then that kind of sent me into a little bit of a panic. And then it was because I felt like I was writing things differently because I felt because I knew that other people would be reading it when I hadn't really considered that before. So I think it was about retraining my brain because a lot of it was imposter syndrome in the fact of I felt like it just I don't know, it felt like it was undeserving. So I feel like it was a good 6 months of retraining my brain of I might write things that are absolutely terrible, and that is fine. I just need to get them out there and then that's it. So I think it was making sure that everything that I was writing didn't have to be perfect because I felt like as soon as that happened, I felt like I don't know. It was such an imposter syndrome of having everything be perfect, else it was rubbish. So I think it was
Mm.
getting rid of that like mindset.
I think there's probably a parallel with that in the idea of jet lag. There's a good
Mhm.
song lyric that says jet lag. I don't know the whole exact lyrics, but that jet lag only affects you when you're trying to fit in.
Mhm.
So maybe that was a moment of kind of seeing the possibilities and then wondering if your style, which got you there, was enough to keep you there.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
mm, yeah, I think that's how you end up getting the formulaic, which is probably in the movie industry. There's probably a lot of truth to that. Maybe in a lot of different art, the idea that this sells, so let's do something that's like that, so it'll sell too. That
Yeah.
you kind of
Mhm.
lose your own style in it, and hopefully you can hold on to your style enough to get through the initial, I have to do this so I can do that.
Mhm.
But I wonder how many people get lost in that, that lose that edge of creativity that they had that was different
Yeah.
because they're trying to fit into the other.
Mhm.
Where do
Definitely.
you think where do you think or do you visualize, if you visualize, where creativity comes from?
I think I've always said that I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing because I can't remember where the idea for the first short film came from. I just remember it. I remember writing the end of it and that's it. And I can't remember the start. I can't remember like downloading the software or anything like that. I have no kind of recollection of it whatsoever. So I feel like I would remember it because it's important. It's the start of something new. So I feel like it was something that I was meant to do, and I feel like it was placed there for me to do that because I'm a great believer in that our purpose in life is established, and we might like veer off in different things and everything, but we'll always be on the path that we're supposed to be on no matter what, even if it doesn't feel like it. So I feel like it was a little nudge to put me on the path that I need to be on. So I feel like that's where it comes from. I feel like I write the things that I'm supposed to write at the time that I'm supposed to write them, and I have no idea like why or how, but I feel like that's where it comes from me, is that it's like a purpose of this is what you need to do at this time to be on the path that you're on in a way.
Hmm. Is that something you seek to understand more or are happy with it as long as it keeps happening?
I think I'm happy with it. I think I'm comfortable in feeling that that's what's happening. And I feel like if I start wondering about it and start looking at it analytically, then I feel like it wouldn't make sense and it would hurt my brain. So I feel like just letting things, like, I feel like everything happens for a reason, and when one door closes, another one opens. Not to be really like poetic and everything, but I feel like that's something that I really believe in. And I feel like with industry, it's so difficult to know if you're doing the right thing because a lot of it is rejection. So it can be really, really difficult to keep on going with something. But I fall back into the comfortableness of knowing, like, I feel like I'm doing the right thing so that I can keep going with it. And that kind of, it keeps me going with it a bit more.
So the feeling is what keeps you going.
Mhm.
What do you spend most of your what creative venture do you spend most of your time on then?
A lot of it is writing, or a lot of it is planning writing before writing. That seems to take up quite a lot of time, but I know that if I don't do that, I will be midway through a script and think, "I have no plot right now." There is no structure to this whatsoever. So I always like to write it out. I have like a notebook of ideas where I can physically sit and write them out, pen to paper. Which really helps. Even if it's just like a general overview of like start, middle, and end. It doesn't have to be like scene by scene unless I'm really struggling to like formulate it in my head. Um, but but yeah, I feel like that's where the most time is creatively. But then obviously time is spent as well, like getting in front of people and admin and emails and things like that. That's always very time consuming.
When you are thinking about a story, do you think about it maybe not always, but mainly in that 3-act structure?
I try to, because I think sometimes I can be quite character led rather than plot led,
Mm.
which isn't great. Or I can ramble. I can ramble for England. It's borderline skillful in a way. But I do it when I'm talking, so I know that I do it when I'm writing as well, because it just kind of, I don't know. It seems to be that I will either have a complete mental block and have nothing to say, or I will say all of the words that have ever been written in the space of 10 minutes. So I feel like that then brings me back to like a formula in a way, so that I don't get too like in depth with characters or conversations and stuff like that, which is important. But obviously plot is massively important as well. So I like to structure it so that I know that I can like pull myself back to that a little bit when I get a little bit carried away.
I imagine it would be like writing a book where the story in your mind is so much bigger than what is in the book.
Mhm.
So for a script, the story is so much bigger. So if you had somebody, either an actor or producer or somebody involved with it, that said, well, why is this person doing this? You could probably give them a great explanation that you've thought out, that
Mhm.
you just didn't write down in the script or not in their version of the script, where you can
Yeah.
explain everything to them. How often do you find that happening? Or if you're pitching a thing, how often are you going outside the view of the script to a broader sense of it to be able to capture the person's attention to make the project?
I think it's really difficult, because I think there's a balance between it, but it's really difficult to know what to do, because a lot of the time you can have a script that you feel really passionately about, and a producer or somebody involved will ask you to change something. And a lot of the time that's fine, but then sometimes there'll be things that they ask you to change that you think, like, that just doesn't sit right. So I feel like there's a massive balance between working out when to do that and then working out how to kind of stick your ground with it a little bit. And a lot of the time, a lot of producers that I've spoken to have said the same thing, that if you feel like something's right in a script, then stick to your guns and go for it. But obviously putting that into practice is really, really hard, because
Mm.
I'm really, really terrible at like at saying no to anything or going back on anything. So I think it is difficult, but I think it's you have to I think I get it out creatively, and then I try and look at it commercially as well, and look at it from a producing point of view of, so a lot of that will involve me rewriting the first scene, because obviously that's the most important thing. That's like the initial pull of it. Um so a lot of my first scenes are quite like chaotic, or like throw you straight in, because that's what I like to watch anyway. I like to watch things that are quite like dramas and stuff like that, that like grasp your attention instantly. So that's something that I try and do. So I think it's about moving things around as well, and looking at it from a producing point of view. But it is difficult to know when your gut's right and when it's wrong.
Yeah, I think that from the broader sense of the story, that your gut is probably saying this is right or wrong because you know more of the story. So then
Yeah.
maybe it
Mhm.
becomes, you have to explain to someone that wants to change it, whether it's actor, producer, whatever, that says, I think they're doing it like this. And you can say, well, that's interesting, but let me tell you this. And then you go
Yeah.
through the whole
Mhm.
story of the person's childhood that's led up to this moment, and this thing happened to them, and this thing happened to them, and now they did this and that didn't work, and that's why they're
Mhm.
now doing this. That then, if you can convince the actor or the producer that that's the way to go, then maybe that's how that, I mean, that's your gut also, because you know the story and they don't.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
at least that's the way I'd like to think it worked. I'm sure there's plenty of times where you can go through that and the person with the money says, no, that's not good.
Yeah.
Or they come up with something even more outlandish and say, let me actually tell you what happened. When this
Yeah.
person was over here doing this thing, their housekeeper didn't do that. They did this, and
Mhm.
their
I
parents
think
think
it
that this happened. And
I think it's interesting as well, because obviously when you're writing it, you know all of that backstory, but then actors and producers and everything, if they don't know that and then they're reading it and they pick up on something, then I find that really, really beneficial, because then I can look at it and be like, Okay, that only makes sense to me, so that won't make sense to the audience at all." So then it gives me the opportunity to change that, because it's really difficult to delete what you already know, or delete what you've already created. You can't like go back on it.
mm,
So I feel like you have a bias towards things, because things might make sense to you, but then when other people read it, then that's why I always get family and friends to read it if I can, because then they can look at it, because they're not industry, and they can look at it and be like, this makes no sense whatsoever. And I could be like, okay, I get that. Now that makes sense.
mm. That's it. I feel like when if I'm doing collaborative writing with someone and I write a chapter and then they say, well, I know we talked about this, but I think this is what's happening. And because you're
Mhm.
doing collaboration, you're less likely to say, no, this is what has to happen. I mean, if you feel strongly about it, that's fine. But if you're doing a collaboration where they write a chapter, you write a chapter, they write a chapter, you write a chapter, that you maybe you could just have the same amount invested as you would writing it on your own, but
Mhm.
you have to give up some of that control, and hopefully at the most it's 50%, and at the least it's 50%. If you can get that, strike that right balance with somebody, if you're writing something to where you
Yeah.
just say, okay, well then let me know what happened. And either you rewrite it or they write it, but
Mhm.
that storyline that you created spins off into some alternate reality somewhere else. I mean,
Mhm.
in your head, that story is still happening, but
Yeah.
we're going to go
Mhm.
with this. And this can happen too, but that definitely happened over there. I think that's
Mhm.
the importance of writing. When people say you got to write what you know and write the truth, is
Yeah.
that if you have a character that's maniacal and lying and all that, then okay, the stories shouldn't match up when you think about it, because that's their truth, is the lying. But if
Mhm.
you have a storyline in your head that you've already thought through and it is the truth of it, it's easy for you to keep in order. So if somebody said, well, no, I'm going to have this person set their cup down over here in the shot instead of right here, and you go, well, that can't happen
Mhm.
because, and then you
Yeah.
go into the explanation of it, it's easier for you to remember all that. And that's your gut saying, this is the truth of that character, versus something where they would say, well, they're going to set it over here and there. And you go, "Oh, okay, it doesn't matter
Mhm.
because it,
Yeah.
it doesn't affect that story that you already have played out, or that was presented to you, or that you thought of, or however it came into your being."
Mhm.
Do you use storyboards or other technology to help get your vision across or sell a project?
A lot of it, I'll use storyboards if it's like I'm working on a project in a few months that I'm directing, but I haven't written. So I'll use storyboards for that. Which my storyboards are terrible because I can't draw at all, like, it's horrific. So I try and use picture storyboards as much as I can to just give, like, a general vibe, and then I'll write a lot of this camera angle is pointing this way and
Mm.
everything like that. I envy people that can draw storyboards because I just cannot do it at all. And then a lot of it with each project, I try and do a pitch deck as well. So to have all of the information of it, if there's people already attached to the project, have all of their information and everything like that, and pictures and like a mood board of what the project will look like, and extracts from the scripts and stuff like that. And I'm a sado, so I love doing that. Like it's one of my favorite parts of it because it's like it's a little PowerPoint and everything. I can sort it all out and put little transitions in and everything like that, which probably no one else cares about. I shouldn't think that anyone would take the script on board because of my PowerPoint transitions, but I still add it in anyway, just in case.
Well, it keeps you going. If that's
Exactly.
what it takes to motivate you, then go for it. Somebody's
Mhm.
going to notice that swipe from left to right.
Exactly, and
Yeah,
that
I
could
couldn't
be
help but
like
notice
the
you did.
deciding decision.
Yeah, you did that swipe from left to right, but then when you had a right-handed character, you did the swipe from right to left. I noticed that. Yeah.
Mhm. And then you can make out that it's like a really in-depth creative decision.
Yeah. What were your biggest influences for your film career?
I'd say the biggest one was I'm a massive Doctor Who fan always. So I grew up with it. Because I think the new season of like New Who started when I was one, I think. So I literally have like grown up with
Mm.
it. Um, so I must have been about 10 or 11 when I saw Rachel Talalay direct an episode. And I mean, I'd never really thought about it before, but it was the first time that I'd kind of seen a woman under the director name. And I feel like, I mean, not that I'd ever, and not that at the time I wanted to be a director, but that was like oh, that's really cool kind of thing. And then I shelved it and I didn't really think about it until later on. And I looked at it and I looked at like all of the people that are involved in Doctor Who and everything. And it all linked back to that one moment watching that. Um, so a lot of it, I mean, I don't write sci-fi at all. So I mean, I'd love to write Doctor Who one day. So I will write sci-fi for that. But mainly for me it's drama. So but a lot of my influences come from Doctor Who because a lot of the episodes, I mean, it's mainly a sci-fi show, but it's so emotional and like heartbreaking and like emotionally destroying. So that's something that I always took with me in my own projects, is that I really, really wanted people to feel something, even if it's just that it impacts one person, then that means a lot. And then there's been so many other creatives since that have really, really inspired me, like Philip Barantini and his one shot of Boiling Point. I found that fascinating because I love doing things differently and being able to tell stories in a different way. So having a film in completely one shot, like an entire feature, is incredible. So yeah, so it is things like that, and it will be that I'll pick up things I'm watching, but it's people that I know as well, and family and friends who tell me their stories and their experiences and things like that, that you know that always makes you feel very, very happy inside because you feel like trusted, which is always really, really nice. But then it's just hearing people's stories and their experiences and their emotions as well, and being able to like transfer that into characters and scripts and stuff. It's something that I really love.
What are your favorite shots? Are there any that you try to incorporate into all the stuff you do, like as a little, I've got to get this type of shot in?
I found I didn't even really notice that I was doing it, but I found that doing it where it's someone in focus and then someone in the background that isn't in focus but can still be seen. So it's like someone more forward and then someone more backward. I love that because a lot of my films have a lot of like power dynamics between characters, and being able to replicate that in shots is something that I really, really love, which I didn't really notice that I was doing it at the time, but it seems to be a theme.
That's nice. What are your, if you had to think of like the top movies, if you were making a list of top movies, features,
Mhm.
what would be on your, I don't know if it's a top three, maybe go with the top three, or just a generic top 10 in no order if you're not as committal. But what do you think about the top three movies?
I think for me it's not I think my top films aren't necessarily things that have influenced filmmaking, but have influenced me in general. So I think that like the Mara Wilson Matilda, that was my favorite film when I was a child. And that was, I mean, it was just, I mean, it's great. It's a great film. So I still love that film. So, and it sounds stupid, but Lady and the Tramp, the ending of Lady and the Tramp, where I don't know if you've seen it, but I think it's one of the I think it's a basset hound that is howling, trying to find, I can't remember who they're trying to find, but they're trying to find someone. And that used to make me sob as a child. So that was the first time that I'd ever kind of watched something and had some kind of like emotional reaction. Because a lot of the time, even when like even now when I'm watching comedies and stuff like that, I'll find it funny, but I won't laugh. I'm quite like wooden. So that was the first time that had ever like happened to me. And then there's been films as I've been growing up, like obviously all of the more teenagery films that you watch, like Hunger Games and stuff like that, and then that kind of opened the doors to dystopian worlds and things like that, which I found that I can't write since COVID because it panics me for some reason. I used to be able to write it, but now I can't. Yeah, so I think it's any film that has made me feel something or has had an impact on me, whether it be kind of an inspirational film wise, or whether it just be kind of that it comes from me in a way.
Those are good. Those are good. So there's going to be a lot of people looking at the YouTube end of Lady and the Tramp now.
Yeah.
I can't even
I don't
remember
know
the
what, it's
ending.
not even that sad. I have no idea why I was always so upset by it. I think it was that, like, I mean, this dog is like howling and it seems like in like real desperation and sadness. And for some reason that like destroyed little me.
Yeah. I remember the hound dog in for Lady and the Tramp. The thing I remember the most is the spaghetti scene.
Mhm.
But hmm, now I'm going to have to see if I can make it back through that movie again. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's the best way for people to follow you or to, if they are interested in doing business through your production company?
A lot of it is just so a lot of social media, that's probably like the best way to contact me, and everything is just under my name or under Spirit Productions. And I always say, just kind of send me a message or DM me or email me or something like that, and I'll always kind of respond and talk about things and stuff like that, and help if I can, or like work on projects if I can and stuff like that.
Okay, I think I have a link for your link tree, which has contact information, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Spirit Productions.
Hmm.
And then it has your filmmaker show reel too.
Hmm.
Okay. So that'll be in the show notes if anybody's interested in checking those out. Any thoughts in closing or ideas that you wanted to talk about that we didn't?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just, if I think mainly fundamentally, if anyone wants to get involved in the industry, go for it and kind of leave any kind of insecurities behind, which obviously is easier said than done. But just trust the process and trust in your work and trust that you'll get to where you need to be, and just keep like knocking on doors until one of them opens, really.
And if it doesn't happen, make your own company and make the movies yourself.
So build the door and open it yourself.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for your time and your conversation. I look forward to seeing your work in the future.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you on the other side of this musical exit. Roll the credits.